Good afternoon. This is an unusual meeting day for us. We're meeting on a Wednesday, and hopefully this will be our last budget meeting. And today is May 2nd, so I'm going to call this meeting to order, and if the clerk could please call the roll.
Ms. Baumke?
Here.
Mr. Cavalier?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mr. Dudenheffer?
Here.
Mrs. Maurer?
Here.
Ms. Shelton?
Here.
Mr. Snellings?
Here.
Madam Chairman, you have quorum.
Thank you. So we do have our resolution in front of us, and just so the board knows, once we have some discussion on the direction that we're going to be moving based on a lot of our conversation from yesterday and actions by the board today, we will take a recess and allow staff to change or modify the resolution, and then we'll come back and vote on that resolution. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, I have a number of questions for staff, if that's okay.
Yes.
No, sorry.
Thank you.
Now my mic is on. So these incorporate the changes, and I know you guys probably didn't put together a presentation for the purposes of the public, but these are the changes that we incorporated yesterday. One of the questions I have is on the sheriff. I see a change of 481. I thought that was 402? Or was there?
It was the salary increase, because going from the 2% to the 2.5%.
Okay.
That 0.5% was distributed amongst all the departments based on the personnel.
Okay. And what would happen if the schools opted, and I'm hoping they don't, but what would happen if the schools opted to do 2%? Is there, the whole idea, I believe, was for parity. And I want to get some information from the rest of my colleagues on the board on what their intention is. Is there a way we can change the, so the idea is parity. If the schools do 2%, I don't want to be off. Is there any input from the rest of the board members on that thought?
Madam Chair, I don't think we should penalize our employees if the school board doesn't come through on their side. I mean, we're willing to bring ours up to 2.5% to match them, and then they renege on it. I don't think our folks should be penalized for that.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, we've gone through this a number of times, and it's never certain as to what raise the schools are going to give. So we really try to be equal when we formulate things, but in the final decision-making processes, it can change over there. We have no influence on that, and so we have to just say what we want to do and stick to our guns, and I'm good with the 2.5 here.
Okay. Any other conversation or comments on that? All right.
All right. And then, so I've gone through, I'm big on the 5-year financial forecast.
Yes, ma'am.
And yesterday when we had some of these discussions about funding, and I'm looking at how much we're giving to the schools with the 2.4 and then the 3.3, and I understand that we've got to do something about day school, and I'm hoping that over the course of the year we can minimize that day school increase, but that stays over in the Health and Human Services Fund. It isn't appropriated to the school board, so we at least have some control over that in some sort of way, albeit not the decision making. But as I run the numbers, I'm still hesitant that they're not going to get what is my priority, and that's that 2.5% raise, which gives me pause. And so I wanted to ask my fellow board members what their thoughts were on that.
Does anybody have? Well, based on, and Maria can speak to that, Mrs. Parrott, our Chief Financial Officer, and Andrea, I'm sure you can as well. We did receive an email just about 25 minutes ago regarding a question that I had regarding the day school. And according to staff, the day school, they do not have expansion space right now for the day school. So we could fund that, but it's not going to
Go anywhere?
that program is not going to be initiated. Is that indeed correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's my understanding as well. We have put in the resolution to budget, to appropriate that, but not budget that $285,000 to the school. To budget, but not appropriate, sorry, I have that backwards. So that the board could decide and look at different options with the school board and see if there are suitable options for this, for that funding. Or the board may choose to do something else with
Or
it
hold it aside
alternatively.
for public day school because it always seems to go up.
For private day school, yes,
There.
ma'am.
Private day school,
my
right.
apologies.
And I will say, Madam Chair, that throughout the last 5 months, there was space available. And suddenly we found out there's not space available. So I'd still like to pursue that. So holding that in budget without appropriation gives us the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Rather than reallocating that to some other need, it seems to me that might be good. That's the thing that's going to hold our costs down if we can get some agreement.
Okay, all right, that's a good point, Mr. Foley, thank you. Okay, are you,
Okay, so what would happen if we, and my concern is funding this $5 million for the 2.5%. And in looking at the 5-year forecast, one of the things, we had 3 different scenarios, and I'm paranoid, absolutely paranoid about future years and what decisions today have on the impact of future years. One of the things that I did notice in the 5-year forecast, we had, the actual rate and then the effective rate, and both of those led us into the negative in perpetuity, quite frankly, if we were going to plan for growth and whatnot. But the 99-cent rate, which at the time that the 5-year financial forecast came out was like the most outrageous thing we could ever think about. Kind of funny what a difference 4 months makes. And, but it put us in the black, to the tune of several $1 million into the future. And I understand that we're changing the baseline, but that makes me, when I go back and I review those documents, that makes me re-review and rethink the funding formula to the schools. And I'm sorry, I'm going out on a limb, and I know we had an agreement or a gentleman's agreement yesterday, but I'm still very concerned about the 2.5%. And is it possible that we could use, because the goal, if we look at the capital plan, the goal was to at least start putting $1.5 million, which is why we talked about the 1 penny, into the capital. And we can do that with year-end money. I mean, we typically have quite a bit in year-end money. And when I talk about capital, I talk about capital more generally. Instead of transportation fund and capital fund, I lump them together because they both include infrastructure. And my citizens are they're just as concerned about teacher raises as they are infrastructure. But I'm wondering if the rest of my colleagues on this board would entertain a change in the operational funding scheme that we talked about yesterday, and then utilize the one-time money to ensure that we are filling or backfilling this capital fund. Because we have a challenge facing us. We've got a courthouse and a high school, although I don't believe in the $70 million and the $140 million. I have big questions on that. But when you look at the fact that $32 million alone, is it $32 or $34 million alone, is just going for school debt payment, we have to get it under control. And so I believe in backfilling with the one-time money, but I would like to see if my other board members would entertain such a change.
Madam Chair,
yes,
I'll respond to that. I don't know, and Mr. Foley maybe can address this, is if this is the appropriate time to talk about the use of year-end money, because it's not really part of this budget, correct? Can't that be a decision for another day?
We had done all the planning towards that coming to the FAB in 2 weeks, and then for final consideration on the 5th of June for the use of one-time money and the approval of a capital plan. And those two certainly go together.
Right, and so if you're okay with that, I think we put that in abeyance for 2 weeks. I understand where you're coming from on that and agree, but I don't want to make that decision today. Now, the other thing, and I did talk to my school board member last night, and oh, by the way, was in the hospital this morning having a baby, so.
Good timing, Jack.
Yeah, I might have got it out of her quicker, I don't know. She was quite today, so that's never a good thing. But, and really, she had a valid point. She told me before that they needed an additional about 3.3 or so million dollars to be able to make the COLA plus the enhancement for the teacher salaries. And the 2.4 that I tried to negotiate in good faith yesterday isn't going to get us there. And so at this point, I pretty much, I've been on board the whole time with the 2.5%, and I'm worried that if we don't give them the extra dollars to make that 2.5%, which I think the extra money will, if we move some money around. And so I'm going to support a change in what we did yesterday with the ups and downs and move more money into the school operating transfer.
Okay. Mr. Snellings?
My only concern with that is there is no guarantee that they're going to give this raise. Is that correct? Am I correct in that? We can't
Well,
force them to do that.
I
We
think,
can just suggest it. Is that correct?
well, I've been talking this morning with Ms. Light and Ms. Parat, and I think Ms. Parat would like to address this because we've all talked about categorical funding, and our big concern is if this money is allocated across the street, will it actually be spent on what we intend for it to be spent on? So Mrs. Parat has some information for us on this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Bromke. Mary Parat, Chief Financial Officer. Yes, categorical, I'm not a fan of categorical appropriation. I think most of you are aware of that. It implies but does not actually give a level of control because the categories are so broad and so much of the school's budget is in the instructional category. If the board chooses a categorical appropriation, that does not in any way guarantee the raises would be provided. One way that the raises could be protected would be if the board made a lump sum appropriation, but withheld, in addition to the 5% that we withhold to make sure our finances are in order at mid-year, in addition to that, withheld the additional amount of money from this year to next year, which is about $5.7 million right now, and withheld that appropriation. Once the board adopts a budget, the school board would then adopt their budget, adopt salary scales, and begin issuing contracts to their 10-month employees, but to their employees, and that's usually done by the beginning of June. At that point in time, if the board's intent is followed, then the board would appropriate the additional $5.7 million. If not, the board could then appropriate that funds for capital or whatever other purposes and amend their budget, because the money hadn't been appropriated, so there's no authority to spend it by the school board. I think we should accompany that with a letter from the county administrator, just designating these are the priorities of the Board of Supervisors, and the budget is developed the way it is because the intent is to provide these raises for school employees. But anyway, that way you can have a control over whether or not those raises are actually given. All appropriations are in place, lump sum before the beginning of the year. Categorical appropriation can create a lot of difficulty and extra work for staff without really imposing a lot of control. So to ensure the raises, that would be my recommendation.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Parat? Yes, Mr. Cohen.
And so, again, the whole concept, either avenue we're doing, this board does not control the raises and the salaries. So that our vote is just to give it the money, and then the school board will make the determinations, one way or the other.
Correct. But
We
the
can make
balance of the-
determinations later on, but in no way, shape, or form is this board actually setting a
No.
pay for any employee.
No, the Board of Supervisors does not have the authority to set school salaries. That strictly rests with the school board. However, the additional appropriation will be made only if those salaries are given.
And so that gets sort of, this new avenue gets the more transparency and, dare I say, oversight that is the intention of categorical, but doesn't actually do the categorical. So it may be a better avenue, is that what you're saying?
It actually provides more of a recourse should the salary increases not be given.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Shelton, thank you. I'm
sorry,
sorry, I
Madam.
missed your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was trying to get in touch. What is the total amount, I didn't want to add these up, but what is the total amount that we are budgeting for the schools this year? Not the increase, but what is the total amount if I added that up? Because I can see it's upward over $300 million. No, not the increase, the total amount, period.
School operating fund. It's in the res.
Right, I've got the operating. It's 282 million.
The resolution just doesn't have the total.
Yeah, it's just the total. The reason I'm asking,
operating
because it
fund.
seems like if I just look at this, it's over $300 million. And I would think that within $300 million, you could find $3 or $4 million for that pay raise. I know I could. So that's why I'm asking, what's the total amount?
Madam Chairman, the total transfer, operating budget transfer to the schools, based upon what we did yesterday, it was $121,517,574 in local funds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Shelton,
sorry.
the
What I was
school-
looking at included the state funds. That's
Right,
why.
the
Okay.
school operating fund is 282 million.
Right.
That does include state and federal funds, and
Okay.
state sales tax as well. The transfer is the number that Mr. Cavalier just gave you. And the total increase for all funds, the county funds under the proposal from yesterday will be increased to roughly 5.7 million. The state funds without any additional funds from the state budget, but based on the lower of the budgets out there, would be a little under 4.3 million. And then they've identified reductions of about 3.3 million. So those sort of the sources of funds schools would have.
But then there's a possibility they may receive an additional $1.5 million.
Yes, and those funds would not be budgeted and appropriated at this point in time if they were to come about. If the salary increases are in place and everything in the field, the board feels that that's sufficient for their operating fund, those funds could then be appropriated to the facilities appropriation category in the school's capital projects fund and be used for capital, or in any way that the board, wanted to appropriate those additional funds if they come about.
Okay, Mr. Snelling?
Mary, before you sit down, go back to your scenario, well, not scenario, but your suggestion that we hold back the appropriation for the raise. So if they don't use that, if they don't give the raises, we just keep the money and use it for something else, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to flush out the one thing. So I want to make sure I understand. So Ms. Maurer, you are recommending certain monies, you can give me that total number, goes to the schools, and that we keep some money back for capital.
3.2 million with the balance going into the capital projects fund.
Okay, and that balance would be, since I...
Roughly 200,000, I think.
Okay. All right. Now, another option on that is we could take, and as far as I'm concerned, this is the year for public safety, social services, and the schools. We know that we all have a tremendous number of needs in the county, but those seem to be our focuses this year. And I would rather take this $200,000 out of our balance that's currently in our capital account and give that money to the schools. Any thoughts? And I guess the other reason that I'm saying that is, with the June tax collection, we're going to have $1 million roughly left over. And if we look at our carryover for the end of this fiscal year, we may have another $1.5 million. So we're looking at $2.5 million right there.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Snelling.
I'm a little concerned that we're giving everything to them. I mean, I agree with you, this is a year of the schools, teacher raises and all that, but I think we need to hold a little bit back. We've got to keep in mind that the state hasn't settled their budget yet. There's a real good likelihood that the schools are going to get at least a $1.5 million increase from the state. Also, if Medicaid expansion goes through, I've spoken to some people this morning, that could cause us some real issues in the future. because the state is going to be required to cut back on certain things in order to fund Medicaid expansion, especially if there's no cap. If there's no cap to Medicaid expansion, this thing could cost $500 million a year or $1 billion a year, we don't know. And if that happens, all of those, everything is going to fall right down on localities. Because the state's not going to raise taxes. They're going to take and pull money out of education, out of public safety, and it's going to come right back to us, and we're going to be sitting here raising taxes like crazy just to keep up. So you might want to hold on just a little bit in preparation for what might be coming.
Okay, well, we hope that's not coming, but you might be right, Mr. Snellings. Any other comments from the board? If that's not the will of the board, I understand.
Well, I guess I'm not clear on this capital project fund that we're talking $200,000 for. Can someone, where is that on my sheets here? It's not in the ups and downs.
It's
I think it was,
lines down from the operating transfer.
Which attachment?
Yeah, which document are
it's
you looking at?
page,
It's 4
page,
lines down
yeah,
from the
page,
operating transfer.
page 2.
It's the balance that remains after you allocate the remainder of the 2.5 cents to the items you've talked about, so.
And where is the money that we've been setting aside for the courts? Is it in that money, or is?
Yeah, I'll let Andrea answer.
Okay.
that.
The money that we have been setting aside for the courts in fiscal year 19 is in non-departmental.
Oh, that's right. The old non-departmental.
I still haven't found the document that you're referring to. Can someone give me the exact document, page number, paragraph, line?
The resolution.
Page 2.
Attachment 2, page 2.
Okay. Transfer to capital projects fund?
Just the remaining balance.
Okay, so Ms. Light, on this, the money that we talked about yesterday on the ups and downs, had we put, what Ms. Mauer's recommending is put 200,000 into that, which is basically going to come into this capital projects account? Okay.
And just to be clear, that money can be utilized for things of, they're coming together with a laundry list of improvements to Ferry Farm. Yes, I'm bringing Ferry Farm back up. Dwayne McCosker would be proud. And evidently, Mr. Goen. We have a lot of improvements, and we're dealing with the capital budget later, as we have discussed. We're doing that, and so, you know, there is a significant number of needs in which we need to start addressing, and also saving up money to address. And this is getting back to, if we don't pay cash for these capital improvements, we have 30, let me go back to it. There is, where is it? The debt service? 31 million in debt service. 31 million can pay for a whole lot of teachers. It can pay for a whole lot of raises. It can bring us up to the market and make us much more competitive. If we didn't have that debt payment, it's kind of like in our own homes, if we didn't have that debt payment, so we need to start allocating. We do have needs. We have significant infrastructure needs. And when I say infrastructure, I mean transportation, I mean school construction, I mean repairs. And we need to start allocating cash to that.
But as a percentage of our total assets and our total budget, our debt service numbers are not out of whack. Is that correct?
That is correct. One of our debt affordability measures is looking at our annual debt service payment in comparison with our overall expenditures in our general fund.
And I might just clarify that we have a policy limit that we are within, and it's 3% of assessed value. So we are certainly within our financial policies. As we attempt to get a third AAA bond rating so we get the best bang for our buck in the future, that policy limit of 3% probably needs to come down to 2.5. Our debt load is high, according to Moody's. It's the reason we've not gotten our AAA bond rating from them yet. So while we're certainly within our policy limits may need to come down to make us more competitive to get that AAA in the third bond rating agency. So it is a heavy debt load for schools by comparison, but certainly within our financial policies.
Correct. Okay, any other questions on that? Mr. Cavalier?
Yeah. If we're talking about the transfer to the capital projects fund, and I'm assuming that's what we're talking about now,
Correct.
finally. What change are you making to that, and where is the money coming from or going to?
Madam Chair, I think I can clarify it, just to be as direct and clear as possible, that I believe what's been proposed is the line before that, transfer to transportation fund. 200,000 of that would move up to the transfer to capital as an ongoing transfer to the capital fund for capital needs. It would come out of the transportation line.
Okay,
And then-
that's the piece of the puzzle I didn't hear.
And
Mr. Snellings?
Andrea, at what point on our reserves, at what point on our restricted reserve fund are we, what's the cap? I mean, it seems like we just keep on adding and adding and adding, and it's getting to be some pretty serious money. Is there a cap there? Or we just have to keep on putting in 12%?
12% is really recommended by GFOA that we continue with that practice. If we look at our unrestricted fund balance as compared to some of our comparable localities, we have less in our unrestricted, and Moody's has cited that as something that we should continue to maintain and maybe enhance.
So, but there's no limit? There's got to be a point in time when they say, okay, you've got enough in there, so stop contributing. Is there a limit?
I think maintaining the 12% and the 2% revenue stabilization is a conservative practice. It depends upon your risk and your liquidity needs, how much you would keep in a reserve. So Stafford County at 12% and 2%, it's conservative. We could certainly increase that, but I wouldn't recommend that we decrease.
I'm just wondering also if we had a real emergency pop up. I mean, we needed $10 million. Can we tap into that fund without being penalized?
I think we would have to explain that to the rating agencies, what happened, and it would have to be something like an economic downturn, something that we've seen, in the late 2000s as the recession hit and real estate properties really dropped. In instances like that, we would have a reason why we did that.
I guess what I'd like to see, and certainly not during, but sometime in the future, because I know you guys are really busy, but I'd like to see how much money we actually save the taxpayers by having a AAA, and a double AAA, and a triple AAA. I mean, how much are we actually saving? And if it's, I'm sure it's a significant amount. If it is, that'll just satisfy my curiosity. But I get that question quite a bit about our restricted reserve up here that's got a pretty hefty balance right now, and it continues to grow. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to make a motion for Resolution R 18-48 with a few modifications. One of those modifications is I would like to increase the operating budget transfer to schools to $3.2 million. I would also like to add to the resolution the $5.7 million holdback should they not do the 2.5% raises, because this is the reason that I am willing to do this, because teachers are that important to me. And that will come out of the transportation fund. And the reason I'm willing to bring that out of the transportation fund is for a number of reasons. Number one, we're in the process of doing a study of the transportation dollars, and that study is yet to be completed. We have end-of-year money that we can put towards the transportation fund. I look at transportation fund and capital improvement funds as fluid. as we identify all the needs in the county, both on the school side, the county side, and with the transportation side, because I look at infrastructure as one item. But at this particular juncture, we don't have the road projects identified because the study isn't completed. Keep in mind, I will be fighting tooth and nail once that study is completed, that we be looking at that. And the balance of the $1 million and the addition to the operating budget transfer to schools will go into the capital projects fund because Lord knows we have a lot of needs there.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it because I do support the extra money for the schools. That's what they've told me they need to accomplish the COLAs and the raises and the enhancements. I'm a little unclear on the numbers here. So there was 978 in transportation. You added 800 to the school appropriation, which leaves 118. Well, no.
You're looking at the wrong document, sir. Look at page 2. Look back to your page 2.
Oh, you took it out of the 1,900,000.
Correct.
Okay. So that leaves 9,316 for transportation fund. And was there another change too?
No, the remaining balance of that $1 million would go, the 1,009,000 would all go into the capital fund.
So 209,316 would go to capital, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's clearer.
We'll let Mary just clarify. I think your numbers are generally correct, but let her clarify.
Just one note, of the $1,009,316, a portion of that was for the FRED expansion. So we would leave that money. So the change we would make, we would increase the increase for the transfer to schools from 2.4 to 3.2. We would leave in the transfer to the transportation fund the funds related to FRED, the ups and downs related to FRED.
That was
The balance-
26,000.
Minus the 4,000 and some change. The
Right.
balance then of that 1,909,000 would be moved to the transfer of the capital projects fund.
Yes,
Is that the
ma'am.
motion? Got it. And we'll add the language on the appropriation of the additional school funds.
I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the clarification because I did forget about the 26,000.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Ms. Parat just went through the numbers. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Snellings?
I'm going to support this. The only reason I'm supporting it is that because we have control of that $5.7 million. Because after what we've been through the last 12 years, at least I've been through, especially last year, when we sent a budget over there with intent of giving a 2% raise to teachers and they didn't get it, this is the only way I'd support this budget. And we can ensure that if they don't get that money, that 5.7 comes back over here, and we'll use it for other priorities. Thank you.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Do we need to, should we recess first, or should we vote on it now?
Madam Chair, we probably should get the resolution in front of you. We'll get the numbers exactly right,
I think so.
and then you can do final action, we'd be finished.
Okay.
So if we could have a quick recess, I think we could get that done.
All right, we'll have a 5 to 10-minute recess. Thank you. Resolution R18-48 for our fiscal year 2019 county budget.
And Madam Chair, the motion that I had made that Mr. Cavalier had seconded has been reflected in these new documents.
Okay. Ms. McClendon, do they need to restate those motions now?
Madam Chairman, I believe Ms. Maurer can motion for R1848 as revised from the dais, and they will reflect the changes as stated. So I don't think all the changes need to be stated, but just motion for the revised resolution.
Okay.
So Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve R18-48 as revised here on the dais.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, would board members would you like to vote, or would board members like to make any comments prior to voting?
Madam Chair, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So, two things that are very important to me. Number one is paying for the growth. Even though I don't vote to approve the growth, some of that's been done by prior boards, I do believe that we're responsible for it. And this $6.4 million that we're sending over across the street accomplishes two goals that are very important to me. One, we take responsibility and pay for the growth. And number two, we're paying for those raises. And so I am fully in support of this, and I thank my fellow board members for allowing the change.
Okay. Ms. Shelton?
I want to apologize to my constituents in Aquia. When I ran for this office, one of the things that was very clear to me as I knocked on doors, and I think it's like 6,000 doors, a little bit over that, then the number one concern was congestion. And I promised all of them and all of you that I would do everything I could to ensure that we address congestion. Well, this year, we're not going to be doing that. So I'm not going to be supporting this, although I definitely support giving our schools the best, and actually not the schools, frankly, giving our students the best quality education they deserve. But I still think that I have to represent my constituents, and I'm sorry that, and I will do better next year to ensure that we do dedicate transportation funds to improve things like Shelton Shop, Brook Road, all the other issues that we have in Stafford County.
Okay. Mr. Cohen?
Yes, Madam Chair. I had said last week when we were discussing about the tax rate that, to me, one element that was important was the due diligence going through the budget. And I want to thank staff and the members of this Board of Supervisors. This is the first time that I've been involved in this, and the agencies on the county side and the staff really did an excellent job. The members of this board looked through numerous issues of spending as well as revenue, and looked at different things to see if there were other ways to deal with things and to reform things. And I think that was excellent. And so I think the public needs to know that it may not have been out in public and we didn't ask questions every day, but there were numerous questions of staff. I think some of them are a little tired of some of us. So this budget addresses many of the key issues facing Stafford. To me, planning and for the future is a massively important aspect, and I'm very pleased that this budget continues the PDR program, which is important, particularly in our rural areas. A major element of it is retaining staff throughout the county, doing things with the Sheriff's Department, with the Fire and Rescue Department, and even in education. We are seeing a hemorrhaging of employees going to other counties, and I think there's a concerted effort. Mr. Foley and his staff have made a great effort to try to stop that and to address the fact that we're in a different state, and I applaud them, and this budget does that. We address school safety, which came up at the last minute, unfortunately because of events in other states. And I praise the sheriff for his innovative way to deal with the school safety issue rather than just going to a very popular solution, which might take a year to implement. He and his team developed one that could very well happen very quickly, which actually gets the goal done. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that and the creation of the task force. Yesterday, we were discussing a proposal to deal with transportation, which is a need. I agree with Ms. Shelton, but it wasn't discussed today. We're faced with the budget that we have in front of us. A couple things that I think I need to stress is first on the schools area. First, and it is not a conflict. We are not on this body, nor am I voting on specific pay raises or pay rates or pay salary scales. We are sending over money to the school system. They make that determination. We do not have that authority. We do have the authority to strongly influence, strongly encourage, but that is not the same as someone voting on an actual salary. And our school system is hemorrhaging staff, veteran staff across the board, from central office into the classroom, into the buses, paraprofessionals, administrative assistants, and so this actually deals with that and gives some assistance with that. Not everybody can get what they want. There is no money fairy that's going to help us with this. Some of us on this board were wanting to put more towards the capital program to pay down our debt. Didn't get that. Some people wanted to put even more towards school. Didn't get that. Some people wanted more for transportation. Didn't get that. One of the things I cared passionately about was tax relief for the elderly. Didn't get that. But we can't get everything. And I think that this effort by staff and by this board to try to address numerous issues in a logical, rational way is very much to be applauded, and I think the resolutions are sound, and I really appreciate the forward thinking and the intelligence of our staff in coming up with thinking outside the box to help us with this. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Snellings?
Very quickly, Madam Chairman, I just want to thank staff, especially Finance and Budget. You folks have put in so much time on this, and it has been a very arduous process. We spent a lot of long hours up here, and I know you guys have spent a lot more, so thank you.
Mr. Cavalier?
Tom said a lot about so many needs that we have, and we don't have enough money for everything, and so we had to make choices. Now, in the end, we almost doubled the original proposed budget, the transfer for the schools. So I think we accomplished a lot in that area, and we didn't accomplish as much in some other areas because of that. So every year we have hard decisions to make, and yet there will still be people that say we didn't give enough money to the schools, and expect to hear that again. But the fact of the matter is this is the number we have, and the 2.5% COLAs on both sides of the street are effectively in place right now with some market adjustments in other areas. So while that's not big numbers, it's something better than probably the average of what we've seen lately. So this is all a compromise, and we have to compromise to make things work. Compromise is not a bad word, and if you don't compromise, then you're going to come up with nothing. So in this case, I think we did what we had to do. Thank you.
Mrs. Maurer?
So I think we need a little bit of clarity on my move from the transportation fund. And it seems like that there's no money going to transportation, and we do have money going to the Brook Road improvements. Construction's not going to stop. Those monies have already been appropriated. Construction's already underway. It's not that we're taking that money away. We still have construction on the Courthouse Road. We still have construction on 610. We still have construction all over Stafford County. I get a lot of those complaints too. When will the barrels be gone on 610? And by the way, I got an update today, end of May. And so it's not that we took money out of transportation. What we did was not increase the transportation fund, and the reason that we didn't do that is that we're in the process of racking and stacking transportation projects that haven't been identified. And so setting that money aside when we have other needs that are identified is why I suggested making the move. And when that project is done, and when those transportation projects have been brought forth and racked and stacked and justified, then we will pivot. And like I said, that capital fund, be it capital fund or the transportation fund, it's all infrastructure to me. And I am critically dedicated to infrastructure. And you will hear more about that when we get into the capital improvement program that we have to approve in a couple of weeks. And so I understand the concern, I understand the consternation, but we did accomplish a lot on this budget. Public safety, when I talked to my constituents, they asked, if you do this tax increase, which was not easy to do, we better see more money for teachers, more money for public safety, more public safety personnel, more teachers. That is what they drilled into my head, and they have agreed to this tax increase, and so have I, and this is where I feel that this money should go. So thank you.
Mr. Dudenheffer?
I will be voting no on this budget. I cannot support a budget that totally neglects our transportation needs it's real easy to point to the public and say, look at all the projects that we have done here, or that are under construction as we look out right now, and all the inconvenience we have. Those projects started 10 years ago. So I'm warning the public right now, again, this board, last year they did the same thing, but they're piddling around with the transportation fund. They're not putting money in the transportation fund. The implication from some members here was that next year we'll put money in the transportation fund. Well, we're basically flat. There won't be additional funds and an opportunity to put money in there. So all the roads that are now currently kind of in the pipeline that haven't started, I don't see us being able to afford the Enon Road project, the Decatur Road project, all the things that are critical needs. We do not have the money to do those. We will not have the money to do that because we're passing on this opportunity and we succumb to just pressure. I can tell you, I was under the impression I had the support of my fellow board members with not neglecting the transportation fund, and I voted for a tax increase that under the circumstances was under false pretenses, and if I had to do it all over again, I would not support a tax increase. I also agree with Cindy here that yes, schools are a problem. I have no doubt that schools are a problem, but drive on Stafford County roads. All the state funding now is tied to localities having money in the game. You have to propose and have money in order for them to even recognize that you're there. There's matching fund money, there's the smart scale money, and we're going to fail in those in the future. And so when these current road projects get finished, that's when they'll start saying, oh my God, we're neglecting transportation. So it takes a long time, and I won't be supporting this budget for that reason.
Okay, I would just like to say that we've had a lot of budget work sessions on this budget. We've had 2 budget work sessions specifically with the school board. You know, we are addressing salary increases with the schools. We're giving them $6.4 million more dollars total, and we're also addressing the school protection officers with 4 of their school protection people that some of my other colleagues have mentioned. We are finally addressing some of the issues in social services. These people have woefully been behind the median for a long, long time and have been neglected. Their caseloads that they have experienced over the last 10 years have been unfair. And we've lost people. And we were way behind, and it was time to address those issues. We're also increasing the sheriff's department, and as well as fire and rescue. Volunteer firefighters, those numbers are decreasing throughout the nation. And as you all know, we have a hybrid structure between volunteers and career. And, you know, it costs $1.2 million to put a career staff in a fire station. So, you know, this was a tough budget period. We don't have enough money for everything, and we tried to address public safety and education, as well as some of our needs in the social service area. And it is unfortunate that we are not able to put money in transportation. I understand where Mrs. Shelton and Mr. Dudenheffer are coming from, and it's something that we're going to have to work on as a board. It is a priority, and I think we can get there. We're just going to have to figure it out together as a board. I do appreciate all of your positions. And with that, I would like everybody to please vote on, let's see, R 18-48. Please cast your vote. Tally the vote. The motion passes 5-2.
All right, Madam Chair, I make a motion for Resolution R18-106. This is the resolution appropriating funds.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Right. Any comments?
Madam Chair, as I've heard loud and clear from several of my colleagues on this board, the 5.2 million that's being earmarked for the 2.5% COLA is somewhat withheld on this, and that is waiting for the school board to ensure that they approve those salary scales, at which point it is my commitment to appropriate that immediately.
All right, any other comments? Okay, with that, please cast your vote for R 18-106. Tally the vote. That motion passes 5-2. And with that, I will adjourn this budget meeting. Thank you.